So today I'm going to ask you a few questions. The first one is, what is cultural appropriation?
Okay, so I don't know exactly what it means, but it's like, so someone who's not Native American decides to dress up in an Indian outfit, like with that's cultural appropriation.
Using things from a culture that's not your own.
Yeah, like when you try to do something that other cultures do, and you do it for your own self without understanding how they do it.
What is cultural appropriation?
So, cultural appropriation is basically when there's a specific thing that, for the lack of a better term, belongs to one culture that another person outside of that culture will do, and it could be taken as offensive. Basically.
And it's not that it's purposely offenseful. It's more it's something that another culture should do. For example, white people wearing braids, or individuals that was used as a protective style for black people. Or for example, if any other culture would have tried to wear a hijab, that might have been a Muslim culture. So it's just stuff like that.
Appropriation.
Cultural appropriation is when someone from one culture takes something from another culture without really knowing about it too well or appreciating it properly.
Kind of like if you're a white person and you're taking a Japanese dress from the Japanese culture, side of one culture, one specific culture takes ideas from that specific culture.
And I guess it's not in the correct way. I've heard people say that.
What is cultural appropriation?
Cultural appropriation is when somebody that's not the culture that they're portraying is portraying a different.
So I think it's when you take an image or a symbol of some culture and you appropriate it to something that isn't what it's supposed to mean originally, almost kind of disrespecting it. For example, if you take a sugar skull mask and wear that, I don't know, for Halloween, that's not what it's for. It's for Dia de los Muertos. And you can't just wear that as a Halloween costume, especially if you're not actually Mexican.
What does cultural appropriation mean to you? Personally.
I don't know. It's never really been a prominent thing in my life. I mean, I'm white.
I thought you were American.
So, I don't know.
What does cultural appropriation mean to you?
Cultural appropriation means to me that within your culture you have something that you can claim as your own, or you can distinguish as something y'all do that someone else shouldn't, that's not proper.
An example would kind of be it's because this is just something that we deal with on a daily basis just living in California. It's if you're not black, period, don't say nigga, period. That's just what that is.
To be clear, nigga, nigger, negro,
in any fucking form of the word, don't say it. No.
Right.
Don't say wigga, don't say no. No.
It's just something that makes you uniquely you.
They covered it. I mean, yeah, but it's almost at this point, so we can only say it because we have a background with it. It means more than just nigga. Mm-hmm. Some people will take that and just use it as a joke or just something to call someone no one ever really thinks about.
We don't use it as a derogatory term.
Exactly.
When you hear it from somebody else, they make it something rude and something more than when you use it as a community in a sense. It's that's my homie, that's my friend. But when other people say nigga, it's most of the time negative. It's don't call me that.
Yeah. Does anybody that does say it that's not black have a backstory to it? No. So it's why are you saying it?
Is cultural appropriation a huge deal in 2018?
Depends on the perspective, I guess.
Yeah, on who you are and stuff like that.
How people take it in, because for some people it can just be it's nothing offensive, and then for some people it's that's offensive.
Is cultural appropriation a huge deal in 2018?
Hell yes.
Definitely.
Hell yes.
Oh. Is cultural appropriation a huge deal in 2018?
I don't think so.
I don't think it is.
To an extent it is, but not. It's somewhat of a deal, but not a huge deal.
Yeah, I guess like I understand if someone gets offended by it, if someone's like cultural appropriating, and then people have the right to get offended to it. I mean, it's up to them, but I really don't care, to be honest.
Appropriation, a huge deal in 2018.
Because a lot of, no offense, Hispanics and other races are trying to say the N-word as if they were black. That's cultural appropriation.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. And the Caucasians.
Yeah, the white people.
Okay, do you?
Because I think this is a really progressive time, or at least we're trying to make this a really progressive time. So I think it's important that we don't take one step forward and two steps back in any place. So cultural appropriation is something that we need to be extremely vigilant about, especially now for that reason.
How does it affect the millennials? So people born like from 1985 to 2000.
I don't know. I feel like
People just base it off of like the trends.
yeah, and people don't really see the actual importance of whatever it is that they're copying and stuff like that. So they don't understand. So it takes a thing that is special to a certain culture and it just messes it up and becomes this distorted thing that isn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm saying.
How does it affect the millennials?
So that's just like the way that we're affecting like you, or that cultural appropriation is affecting youths. And so that's basically like they're growing up with, again, sorry, I'm black. So, but it's like all these kids are like growing up hearing non-black people say nigga, and like they're gonna think that's okay, and it's not. And so it's gonna be a problem in the future if we don't teach them now. Like that's how it's affecting our youth.
If you don't teach them now, and if they don't know
any better,
like they don't know why they're saying it, they just see some rapper doing it and they want to be that person.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's glorified now. Guns and drugs is glorified now. They think that's what it means to be black. And it's not.
It's not. It's so much more. Oh my god.
How does cultural appropriation affect the millennials?
As a millennial, I believe that like us as a population, we're just not as connected to our roots as our parents or grandparents are. And since I lived in the Philippines for 4 years, even over there, people they're not connected to the Filipino culture as their parents or grandparents are. So like everywhere around the world, like no matter where you are or what country you're from or what country your parents are from, just our generation they're so connected to this technology of social media and fame and popularity of trying to fit in and not being necessarily proud, for lack of a better word, of their culture that they were born into.
To me, it affects millennials. Well, like, cause I'm actually from Japan, but I still like identify myself as like American first, just because I live here for a long time, and I don't know. Yeah, I feel like the same way. It shouldn't really affect millennials too much. I think if they really do decide to get offended by it, they're being a little like sensitive. It's like it's fine. It's not a big deal, Like let people appreciate the culture.
How does it affect the millennials?
I feel like millennials are affected by it by some people are raised in cultures that are very like protective and stuff like that. So when they see other people appropriating their culture, they can take it very wrong or like become very upset over it, and it can cause lots of fights and arguments and such.
How does it affect the millennials?
So I think millennials and a little younger are usually the ones who are only talking about it. You really wouldn't find like a baby boomer or someone below that but still above millennial talking about cultural appropriation at all, really. So the effect of millennials, they are the ones who have to talk about it the most.
Lastly, what is the difference between cultural appropriation then and now?
Back then they didn't have like social media.
blackface when people would literally, they're white and they didn't want African Americans to be a part of the things, they would paint their faces black. In old musicals, a lot of them, there's a lot of cultural appropriation, like the musical Anything Goes. They literally would have people disguised as Chinese and they would talk in that accent with the hat on too, which is very not good, but yeah, and stuff like that.
What is the difference between cultural appropriation then and now?
I feel like cultural appropriation then was more of like blackface. According to now, it's more like hairstyle and like the culture of it.
Especially in films and stuff, they had like a lot of blackface because they didn't like let black actors do stuff. And when they did let black actors do things, they had to be a role that didn't portray black people in a good way.
Like servants, or like the maid, or like the nanny, or like you got this old black lady raising your white baby. Sorry.
And it goes to, like, I was relating that to the fourth question of how, like, white people in the 60s were fine with calling a black person nigga and stuff like a nigger and stuff like that. Oh, I hate that word. And they taught their kids how to do that, so their kids are teaching their kids how to do it. But the difference is that black people then could get lynched, could get shot, could get raped, and yes, the shooting can still happen now, but we're able to like defend ourselves more. We're able to like start protests. We're able to do that type of shit.
Will beat your ass.
We're able to do that without the law telling us that we can't. We're able to stand up for ourselves. We're able to, like I said, just do stuff that our ancestors weren't able to do.
And it sucks because even then law is still a problem, but not as much as it was back then.
Yeah.
I personally, right now, I do understand, being that we're all black, we're focused on that topic. We can also, though, broaden that to other cultures.
Definitely.
And it definitely has changed a lot for every culture. Everyone can be more free with who they are and embrace what their culture is, compared to then it was kind of, not to be racist, but it was kind of controlled by white supremacy, and no one was really able to be who they were and couldn't embrace that.
What is the difference between cultural appropriation then and now?
Typically now, it's usually out of respect for one culture, and it's saying, I appreciate your culture. But a lot of it back then was actually with intents to offend the other culture or mock them. So an example is blackface, because a lot of people know that blackface is done typically because only white actors are typically wanted for plays and movies and whatnot. And it's even seen in the music industry, like back in the, I believe, the 50s or 60s, black people were like very prominent in the history of rock and roll. But white people would see these songs that were written by black people and say, I want to get fame for that song, and I want to make sure the black person doesn't get all the glory. So they would actually make covers of those songs in spite of the original artists.
I think it was a lot more like harmful intent in the past. I think nowadays if someone like appropriates culture, it's done accidentally. They don't really realize what they're doing. So I think, you know, like, give them a pass, because like in the past they like deliberately knew what they were doing. They were mocking the other cultures. Nowadays I think they're just trying to appreciate it more.
What is the difference between cultural appropriation then and now?
Like before, it wasn't that big of a problem. Like people weren't upset with like it was a problem, but people weren't upset about it, you know? Oh, but what's back then, you know? Is it like the 90s, or is it like
Anything in the past?
Oh. Okay, well then we'll go with it was a bigger problem in the past, because we had stuff like blackface, and like they would paint especially people of like the African American race as monkeys and stuff like that, and white people would dress up as those things and go around and do bad things with them.
So I think that was a fair point, but that's not really cultural appropriation, because there's in African or black culture, there's no blackface or anything like that. So that's just extreme racism. I think in the past it was a problem because nobody gave you a second look if you were to wear an Indian headdress or an indigenous headdress, or wear an actual Indian dress, that they would wear at weddings and stuff like that. So no one really addressed it back then because the culture of like being more sensitive to things like this, like progression, wasn't really a thing like it is now.